Good evening. Welcome to the October 22nd meeting of Manhattan Community Board 5, Land Use Housing and Zoning Committee. I'm Nancy Gosho, Chair of the committee, and I'm joined by our Vice Chair, Julie Chu, and committee members. Please go around the table, starting with Michael.
I'm Michael Greeley.
Yaron Nodi Victor.
Zul Zolkowitz.
Kim McCall, Annie Rowland,
Seth.
recording in progress.
Devin Frizz.
Libby Hutton.
Okay, and online?
Encore DeWall.
Thank you. Okay, so any items voted on this meeting tonight will be voted on the full board by the full board on our Thursday, November 13th, full board meeting. Before we start the agenda, do any members of the public or the committee members have any new business items? Raise your hand. Any hands raised online? Here? Okay,
There is a hand raised.
there's a hand raised. Anne?
Yes, hello. Good afternoon. My name is Ann Trebell. And for over 20 years, I was a street artist on 6th Avenue and West 53rd Street. I sold my prints, my artwork there, off and on, probably since I was about 16 years old. And I can say without exception that it has become chaos on that corner. I was assaulted about 3 weeks ago and wound up in the hospital by another vendor fighting for space on a street corner. The police did nothing. Midtown North also doesn't respond to 311 complaints. They just routinely mark them as
Hey,
closed.
Anne, this is Nancy Gosho, and I'm gonna stop you right there. This is not a land use issue. This is an
Bye-bye.
NYPD issue.
No,
So,
no, it is not, ma'am. This is public comment. I'm a member of the public and I have a right to speak without interruption. You need to look at your Robert's Rules of Order. That's why I don't talk to you anymore. I retired. You did nothing. In 20 years of calling you, you did nothing.
What was the exact location?
stop. Stop. This is not a land use issue, and you are out of order. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, no other new business. So we're gonna go this way. Our meeting will be run in this order. After each presentation, committee members will ask questions, then we'll take questions and comments from the public. While there's no time limit on comments, we ask that you speak succinctly and avoid repetition of a prior speaker. Please use the raise hand function and Julie will call on you. After the public questions and comments, we will go into our business session. Only committee members and board members can participate in the discussion. No further input from the public unless recognized by me, the chair. Board members will be promoted to panelists for the business session. Finally, I will call for a motion, a second, and take a vote. And after the last agenda item, we'll adjourn the meeting. So tonight, we have 2 items on our agenda. With one item, we will be preparing and writing a draft resolution. The first item we have, which is a discussion led by Julie Chu, is about district needs and budget priorities. So Julie, why don't you tell us about the list that we want to put together? And Kim, who is actually spearheading this whole list for the full board for all of the committees, will chime in and work with Julie on this. So Julie, why don't you go ahead?
Okay. Yeah, sure. So for new members, do we have any new members here? No, great. So you guys know, for district needs, our board chooses top 3 pressing issues. So on the screen, and I just forwarded you the material as well. From last year, we have homelessness as our top issue, and then economic recovery and development, followed by affordable housing. So I think for land use and.
Yeah.
Feel free to jump in whenever, you're trying to get feedback from us about the top 3 district needs as well as. Budget requests for housing.
Yes. Yeah, like maybe vouchers or,
Yes.
yeah.
And so before we dive into detail, just to show you guys some of the budget requests we've had in the past, this is Tristan's worksheet last year where. So the budget committee used to have these groups where we would reach out to this organizations, it's in this column. Legal aids, I'm sorry, there's such things, let's see, my snapshot. So this is the housing economic development, budget request items that we assembled last year as a group where, individuals from the budget committee reached out to these organizations to ask for specific budget requests. It's really important that they be specific because the city comes back to us with comments about this is not, when it doesn't make sense to them, they provide these responses that are not helpful. So we learned from the past that get as specific as you can, right? So you can see some of these budget items, you know, they call out specific programs, whether it's city FEPS, the AHTP program, 1515 program, the Just Pay campaign. You know, $140 million for the next 2 years for the open door funding. But these we get from specific organizations that, or bills that come to us. So we're looking for feedback from the group on what we would want to ask for this year. It's a little different because I know a lot of due diligence was done last year where we had specific people reach out.
And that is happening as well. Yeah.
Can you articulate a little bit the distinction between what this committee would ask for and what CS2L would ask for? So it looks like our asks in the area of affordable housing would be more about capital asks.
Well,
And CS2L would be more programmatic.
so just to explain a little further, there are capital budget requests and expense capital budget requests. So those are a little bit different. The housing economic development tab is, I think, more for us, but there maybe some.
Some of those look a little CS2, I mean, if it overlaps, it overlaps. I guess it doesn't matter. Right.
It doesn't matter, we can segment it later.
It's not going to be submitted by committee. It's going to be submitted by the
All
whole
together, right.
altogether, so it won't be divided up.
Yeah.
So I believe that if there is overlap, that's okay.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes it, that maybe makes it even a higher priority, Kim.
Right.
Yeah,
Right, okay, that's fine.
well said, yeah. So to Julie's point, we're also, you know, we've been, and Mike is really engaged as well. I was looking for you down there. We've been reviewing agency feedback, which is helpful. Oh, you can't see me on camera.
Yeah.
And we've also been reaching out to community organizations, bids, and other neighborhood associations. And so we're just trying to get as much feedback as possible so that by the time we're at full board, we've heard from everyone that has something to add to this. And we feel like it's been very collaborative and comprehensive for our district. And so that's why we've come to the committees. Obviously, this committee is the expert in this land use. And so if there are things that have come across our desk over the last year that we really want to advocate for, even if we don't have all the specifics, but it's something like, we think this thing could be better financed, the task force could then do a little more digging and work on it as well.
I'd just like to say that for me, I think the, our points of agreement
Mhm,
things that were underfunded
mhm.
would be the ones we would ask for, right? Or if we feel there's not enough funding on some of the points of agreement, we could ask for increased funding.
Yeah,
But we have a really good list, right? I mean, there's not anything we would add to that.
Well, I think we might add also some of the ideas from the Manhattan Plan too, because there were some in there
Okay.
that I think I think between the two.
And I would also add anything we can talk about in terms of access to public bathrooms. Right.
yeah, I think I might be under infrastructure, but you worked on this last year too, right, Julie?
Yeah, but just to respond to that, it's better to request something that already has an existing program. Because if you're like Broadway Vision, maybe that's more specific, but if you're asking for what's something from a need,
So there's net new.
like totally new.
Yeah, that's what.
Then
that's not gonna-
they're, it's like,
Okay.
To like create.
That's a good
program.
lens. I mean, that's a good lens to use.
they're not gonna be able to.
Or a lot of times it's do a study to
Yeah, money for a study.
determine if we should run a program.
If they can't
And
do it to the
sometimes then they
budget, they would need.
tell
to
us
see some
to
legislation
write a
to
resolution,
do it.
to ask for a study
Yeah.
before they can do anything with the budget.
Yeah.
But on the bathroom thing, because I was looking at the responses too, I think that went in certainly under parks at one point,
Yeah,
and their response was not,
I'm trying to find it in
all that
last year's.
positive. They supported in theory, but they were also like, bathrooms aren't appropriate in certain parks.
Remember that exactly, but I think that's, we could definitely push for more funding for parks. Specifically for maintenance of bathrooms.
Yeah, I think that was what was in there, but they responded,
said,
trying to find the response.
Agency supports but cannot accommodate resubmit. So we should include it again.
Yeah,
That we're adding public restroom buildings, usually when a park is undergoing renovation and when funding is provided and where there is available space. And then to your point, not every park has sufficient space or needs to have one.
yeah, that was in their response, yeah, so.
I guess I can definitely look at the points of agreement and see what's appropriate that we can bring in.
Yeah.
But then a lot of these items.
The ones
that
from
were
last year?
Last year, I mean, I imagine we would want to request them again to see.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that is typically the plan of attack. Is to re-include things that didn't get funded.
Yeah, or even if they were funded, wouldn't we want to ask for funding for this fiscal year? So
Yeah.
that,
Depending, like if it's a program, yeah, not a capital. Yeah. I'm looking at, okay, now I'm looking at.
yeah, it's also by agency too, so DCP. We have a law studies for DCP.
And some of those could be you go to the one that's the Times Square Alliance that is about, right there, sorry, at the bottom of the screen. Study for finding alternative use of vacant office buildings, like that, they're very broad. There has been progress on that. I don't know if there's a single study, but there has been progress on that, so maybe we're still asking for that, but in a different way, acknowledging that there's been progress, that there is somewhere.
Well, city of yes, too.
Exactly.
SMX.
Right. Right, given that COI didn't have. It turns out to be zoning this way. Okay, anyways, so there's some that need to be a little refreshed here.
I don't know if anything else is jumping out for you guys. But also for district needs, we could also provide comments on what we think are the top three in order of priority for Kim to make.
Yeah,
Do you guys feel like homelessness is still the first priority for CB5 versus economic recovery and or affordable housing?
transportation has also been mentioned.
They're ready to do it tomorrow.
Oh, great, yeah. Nice. Yeah,
I mean, I would maybe
Karen.
change that order and put affordable housing first.
To affordable housing first.
That would, but I don't know if that matters. I think top three is top
We
three.
had bonus on the list.
Yeah, good question.
Yeah.
Was it economic recovery? Is that a
COVID.
Yeah.
more so.
era issue?
And we talk about it being a priority and we do very little on it. Very, very little.
Well, I think it's because we're midtown and it's not normally a priority for any other community district. But because we're the business center. Recovery, I don't understand why we use that word, but
Right.
some type of
Economic
economic
development.
Right.
development.
But I guess what percentage of these asks like ladder up to that? Very few.
Well, way I look at it, like transportation is connected with the economy, getting
Oh,
people to
okay.
work.
Okay.
It toward, it's all homelessness, even, homeless in front of businesses, is connected with economic development. There's a lot of ways to approach
I think
economic.
bid funding too for things that they want, because the bid exists to then
Got it.
have more people in them and the bids get more money from the taxes, but they have to be full.
So where are we? Can't hear it.
Lydia, couldn't hear you.
Oh, just that funding that bids have requested in our outreach, like it's a business improvement district, that improving that public area or improving parks helps increase rent, helps it become more attractive to stores or for people to stay longer outside. So when they spend more money, especially if they can go to the bathroom while they're out shopping with their kids, they will also stay and spend more money while being in that place too. Sort of a virtuous cycle. But that's why it's relevant. If we do want to keep it, I'm not saying we do want to keep it, but that would be the connection.
Understand.
Other comments? Things to add?
I mean, this is very broad, but it goes back to what we're saying about the conversion, like, and we sort of did a little of this amount about in the Manhattan Plan, which is why I think it's useful. It seems like for affordable housing, there's programs that we want to advocate that continue to be funded or get funded more. And then there's a whole bucket of like money to help identify opportunity. And that's money to study conversion opportunity, that's money to, it's like, and we got into some of that Manhattan Plan, and I think if we can sort of flesh that bucket out, I think we've all had that up. I mean, it's like Isabel's working on, it's like we've all craved, like, how can we better identify the opportunities in our district?
Yeah.
And I know it's boring to ask for studies, but how else are we gonna do it, right?
We could request the Economic Development Corporation to come and speak to us about this. That might be, start with that and find out from them. Let them tell us what their plan is for Midtown Manhattan. I don't think any of us know, do we?
That's what I'm saying. So we don't,
Well, we need them.
we would need
Invite
that
them.
first, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And what committee would do that?
Yes, this one.
Again.
Staple?
That's not.
It's like a city services.
But
Yeah.
that's something for the chairs to figure.
Does that make sense? I'm not giving you anything specific, but it's like, how can the city spend money to better identify affordable housing opportunities?
And I wonder if TCP would respond, this is what we're doing with them.
I think so, like, that's why I'm a little suspicious of it, but I think maybe just reiterating then some of that.
It's not forbidden in the budget request, so.
Right. Like put more money into identifying opportunities.
So I'm gonna put together the Manhattan Plan and, we have agreement
Yeah,
and compile a list for you.
great.
And if anybody else has any additional items, feel free to send it to me and I'll just compile everything in one document.
That'd be great. Thank you. That's all.
TV last year.
We're gonna do as much as possible.
Who makes the determination of the top? Is that your committee will make a recommendation to the board?
But that's why we want to hear from all the committees
Yeah.
too. So by the time we get to exec and full board, everyone's weighed in.
So when do you need it by, so we can have a drop that date for
In a week.
in a week?
I mean, given what the board has discussed, I think like certainly affordable housing
Yeah,
I understand what's being said about economic development. We talk a lot about quality of life issues these
Yeah.
days.
yeah.
And that's maybe not represented. So I think that's a trickier conversation, and I know.
Yeah, we have kind of started talking about, could there be a category that's more like social services, that's inclusive of homeless services
Right.
and other public safety and
Right.
other quality of life issues?
And then it's like, is it too broad then, or,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know.
Might
That's a
like
tough one.
dilute it a little bit.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Alker, you have anything to add?
No, I'm supportive of this approach.
Okay.
Awesome, thanks.
Anybody
Ian.
else? No? We're good?
No, I'll get to that, let's be, yeah.
Okay, great. So our next item is the hotel special permit. So David, why don't you tell us what you have on
Okay.
this?
So the background on this is, that, through a number of discussions while we were going through MSMX, we identified 3 issues that we thought were, kind of exogenous issues beyond the zoning and the points of agreement stuff that we were dealing with that were potentially impacting what development actually occurs in MSMX. And 2 of the 3 were the real estate tax abatements that apply to new construction and to conversions. One has a prevailing wage requirement. The program basically is not used for anything larger than 99 units around the city. And 467s, the conversion tax abatements, that's starting to phase out July 1st of 26, which is exactly the wrong timing for MSMX. So we already raised that. A letter went out the last couple of weeks, kind of raising those 2 issues. And we mentioned the fact that we had raised the hotel special permit as an issue. It came up in the points of agreement. I think it came up in some of our earlier actions on this, but we didn't really have an answer. And so what we committed to was bringing some kind of answer to the next board meeting in November. And so that's what we're going to try and do today. I have broken the issue down, since not everybody is familiar with this thing. I broke it down to kind of what's the history been of where hotels are located in the city, what issues specifically came up in MSMX that relate to hotels. Briefly show you kind of the scale of what the issue is because of the large number of potential development sites. The board has taken action twice, 4 plus the recent inclusion in MSMX. And then I kind of float out, elements of a possible solution here. And the hope was that, we can kind of focus on that and see if we can come up with a recommended alternative to the current system, which, by the way, I mean, the current system is special permit that requires a full unit. And so we can go ahead. So the history is the hotel location has been an issue that has been sliced like a salami, for decades. The first pass at it was in 1974. The city went back and looked at medium duty and heavy industrial areas where hotels were being built, where there were really no services anywhere near it. I mean, it would be like building a hotel next to a concrete plant. So the zoning didn't distinguish the hotel use from these heavier industrial uses. And so in 74, a special permit was required for M2 and M3, medium and heavy industrial, anywhere in the city. And the goal at the time was to prevent industrial displacement. So this, in theory, the city didn't want hotels being built on sites that could go towards manufacturing and industrial uses. So that was way back in 74. And this cropped up again in 2017 as part of East Midtown rezoning. And so a special permit with a ULURP was a requirement. And that's the sort of bluish purples, that's the East Midtown district. So that's now subject since 2017 to a special permit requirement to ensure that hotels provide on-site amenities and services that support the area's role as a business district. So now here's, the next reason, not to build a hotel. It's because the primary goal of East Midtown was to build office space. And so now you need to go through a special permit ULURP process in order to build a hotel in, our largest business district. Then the next crack at it was in 2018, since M2 and M3 zones had been dealt with, this M1 zone came up. M1 is light industrial. So in 2018, the city council passed a text amendment that requires a special permit. And here the reasoning for it was broadened to ensure that sufficient opportunities for industrial, commercial, and institutional growth remain. The orange areas on that map are the M zones, the M1 zones in our district and to the west of us. And most of that, the four major quadrants in the middle are MSMX. So the process that was provided for was that the City Planning Commission performs a case-by-case, you can read it, site-specific review to ensure that hotel development occurs only on appropriate sites based on reasonable considerations. These are it's very general language, whether a hotel presents potential for conflict with surrounding uses and reflects the general character of the surrounding area. So it's a full ULURP, and the test for this are these very general findings that have to happen in order for a hotel use to be approved in an M1 zone. And then again in 21, the concept that was in the M1 special permit in 2021 was broadened all over the city. And not just in M zones, but in other commercial and mixed use districts. And just, the factoid that came out of this, the EIS that was done at the time said that this could result in a shortfall of 47,000 rooms over a 10-year forecast period from when the change was made. So, that's the background. And the issue, yeah, you go ahead. The issue is that since particularly the M1 zone sites when that restriction was put in place, there've only been two new hotel applications, well, the citywide. There've only been two new hotel applications or approvals in the city since 2021. One of them's in our district, and it was one we did last year, I guess, right? The Little Nell, which is like the highest of high-end hotels. So that's what we're approving, because those are the only people that are willing to spend the time and money to go through the process. And that's a $2,500 a night hotel. So, the issues though, the real issues that were trying to be addressed by this were that there were a number, particularly starting in around 2010, there were a number of M1 zones, a lot of mid-block zones, mid-block sites that were developed as limited service hotels. So I'm sure you've seen them all over Midtown. In some cases, there are like 3 hotels looped together next to each other. And you can see in the zoning diagram, what ended up happening was they built towers with setbacks from the sidewalk. So, or from the property line. And so what you ended up with are much taller, narrower buildings with these forecourts that became areas for late night gathering of all sorts. And so there were a lot of complaints from residents about that. Part of what contributed to this over time was that these manufacturing zones, these industrial areas, because of the 1982 loft law, there were a lot of people that moved in illegally into these loft buildings, but in 82, the decision was made to legalize them. As long as work was done on the building to make them safe, essentially. So you ended up now having a lot of residential tenants living in industrial areas of the city, you know, garment district. I mean, we saw not a lot of this in MSMX, but you know, quite a bit of it. We saw it, you know, when I was on SLAP, we would get proposals for clubs in industrial lofts, and we would get pushback from residential tenants that had lived there for 30 years. Because these buildings had been converted under the loft law. So now we have this kind of built-in constituency that doesn't really want to see this use. Because it conflicts with the rights that they were granted, you know, way back in 1982 to live in these locations. As I mentioned, in 2010, we started to see a lot of this development taking place. There's actually a block in our district, 28th Street, kind of in the stretch between Broadway and 7th Avenue. There've been 8 hotels built in that block. You know, we saw it again at SLAP when they would all try and get liquor licenses, and the community would turn out to complain about all the noise and late night parking issues. You can see the list, drinking establishments that didn't exist before. So that kind of grew, led to the push to have a greater degree of control over where hotels were built in these districts. And I contrast in the bottom point, you know, when you look at some of the more outlying areas, you know, here MSMX is very centrally located. We've got a ton of subway stops. It's well serviced. That was one of the complaints about the M2 and M3 districts, is that there were no services. So you'd go and check into your hotel, but there was no restaurants, you know, there were no shops, there was nothing. That's certainly not the case with MSMX. And now it's also a high density area. I'll show you in a second, you know, how the zoning change impacts site development there. But the feeling was that MSMX really does not share a lot of the characteristics where people are concerned about hotel development. And it's also kind of, if it's going to be a mixed use zone, it's going to be hard to get there if it's strictly residential. And even that limited by the tax abatement issues. It's going to be hard to get to a real mixed use if this is if hotels are a use that can't be accommodated in MSMX practically. So I mentioned only 2 new hotel permits. We did lose a number of hotel rooms. 6,000 hotel rooms, it's estimated, were permanently removed from the hotel inventory during COVID. And 7,500, and this excludes units that were used for homeless shelters or anything, but roughly 7,500 rooms have just been converted to other uses. So there's been a net loss of, you know, roughly 14,000 units. There was a push when the special permit were put in place. There was a push to hurry up and build hotels. So we are nearing the end of a period of time where we kind of overbuilt hotels. We also had the impact of COVID, obviously less demand. But we're now working our way out of that. And the most recent statistic for this year is we're averaging about 85% occupancy of hotels, which is the highest in the country. And that is expected to rise in one of the forecasts that I look at to 89% by 2029, because sometime in 26, we stopped delivering the new hotels that had been in the pipeline before that. The average daily rate, you know, room night rate is $350 a night average, and that's citywide. So, you know, that's not, Little Nell doesn't impact that number that greatly, but we're talking about citywide. The average daily rate is about $350. That is 25% higher than it was in 2019. And the forecast that I saw shows that rising another $50, so another 15% by 2029. Then the other piece that has kind of supported the hotel rates and helped boost occupancy is the local I-18, which restricted, you know, Airbnb and the other short-term rentals. And so those people essentially, pushed into hotels. And finally, the other, just to kind of throw it in, so people, there's been a lot of stuff going on in in the city council on hotels. And the most recent one was the Safe Hotels Act, which was a reaction to criminal activity in hotels. And so it required 24-hour front desk staffing, required, security be available and manned. It also required that core employees be direct hires of the hotel and not be contracted out through third parties. And so there has been impact in operating expenses because of this. So that's kind of the general reaction. The picture you see on the right is actually the southeast quadrant of MSMX. So Madison Square Park is, to the right of this. And these are the sites that were identified as developable sites. And if you look at it, I mean, a number of them are these thin little spires that, won't work for apartments. The floor plates are too small. And so they're obvious locations for hotel development, but not if it takes, millions of dollars in 2 years to get a special permit each time we want to build one of those. So this is on the left are the development sites that were identified in the environmental impact statement for MSMX. So each of those is a potential development site. So either it's vacant or underutilized. I think there were a total of like 63 of them. Some of them are large, most of them are small. And so the small ones, again, in particular, would be logical locations for hotels. What you see on the right-hand side was analysis that this committee did. Said, on the left, Department of City Planning just looked at the physical condition of an existing site. On the right, we said, all right, well, if you upzone these areas, then what sites will be underbuilt by 50% or more? That's the red. And, the shades get lighter as they get less underbuilt, but you can see how many red zones there are. The one change I'll say is like in the southeast quadrant, this was done at an 18, whereas what was finally approved was a 15. So that might change it somewhat. But you can see there are just a ton of potential development sites throughout MSMX, just based on how underbuilt these sites are. So there's an existing building. It's not considered vacant or underutilized like on the left side, but it could be a development site. And so, I show you this just because, again, we don't want to rule out a specific use like hotels when we have this level of potential development. George Janes raised an issue when he saw a draft of this, that, what we're also saying is that some of these sites might not go into housing production. I couldn't tell you, of the roughly 10,000 units that were projected, for all of MSMX, I can't tell you that if, a handful of them were to become hotel sites, how that would reduce the number of units, but that was George's, from our standpoint, part of the policy decision here is, do we want this to be, 100% housing, or, are we interested in seeing other uses? And I guess, the position I'm taking here is that we ought to, we can talk about how we control how much of it becomes hotel rooms rather than housing, but we ought to be allowing on a reasonable basis for the development of new hotels. And stop me if you have any questions, because I only have 2 more slides. Yeah.
David, will developers have to observe the street wall now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, so that scheme of pushing the building back and building a tower under MSMX, that's not allowed. Outside of MSMX, it could be allowed. So we have taken, I would call it, three actions, and it's interesting because you also see how much the board's view of housing development or development in general has changed during this period of time. So in July of 2018, a resolution was passed to deny the new M1 hotel special permit unless Manhattan is excluded. And the logic here was that the board did not want residential being built in these M1 zones. And it's easier to get a BSA variance, and we'll talk about what that is later, but it's easier to get a variance to build residential if you can't propose hotel as an alternative. So it was kind of a interesting logic. But essentially they said, we don't want special permits that would make it hard to build a hotel because that will make it easier to get a variance to build residential, and we don't want residential. So, I don't know how much of a real precursor that is for us as we think about it, but that's an action that we took. And then, in 21, when the citywide special permit came up, that was also a deny unless. There it was more specific to the content, and it's something that we should talk about, particularly number one, that the findings, as I sort of read before, are very, very general. And so these applications are very general, and the basis on which a decision is made to allow, to issue the special permit is a challenging decision. And so the board at the time said that the findings should be much more specific, so that the tests are narrower. If we're going to continue in this process. And the second point is similar. I mean, it went in to say, there are things like, we would study in an EIS, like vehicular and pedestrian traffic, air pollution, street wall continuity. All of the things we would look at should be part of what goes into the findings. So both make them more specific and have more findings than the 2 or 3 very general findings that were contained in the 2021 special permit. And then again, as I mentioned, in 25, we had language that says we want to study this. And specifically for MSMX, we want to potentially propose changes to the special permit process in order to allow hotels to be built in that area. So that language was specific to MSMX. All right, so actually the memo that was sent around for the next item on the agenda was kind of helpful on this as well. There are kind of 3, outside of Euler, there are 3 possible avenues for reviewing and approving hotel uses. So the first one is certification by the City Planning Commission. And that is more based on specific findings. It's more technical. And so that's where this idea, which I mentioned below, the idea of, having more specific findings could potentially feed a faster certification process that reviews the findings that we're recommending. And even a certification can be referred to the CB. Our scope of review would be much narrower because it is a technical review, but we still have the opportunity to weigh in. And so we'll talk below about what are the possible findings that we might do that way. But so that's one process. The next process would be City Planning Commission authorization, which is more discretionary. And there it's a full referral to community board. So we would have the right to do a full review of the proposal, and CPC would also have the right to do a full review. And in theory, it would be based on the broader, vaguer findings that were contained in the original legislation. And the last one, which quite frankly, like, it exists, but I don't really know that it would apply here, which is the BSA, the Board of Standards and Appeals, which oversees zoning variances, you know, could also come into this process if there were special extenuating circumstances on a site-by-site basis. But that was so specific and such a narrow case that I didn't think it was worth really spending the time on there. So those are kind of the three avenues. And then the question is, if we wanted to, you know, as our prior resolutions called for, if we wanted to try and tighten up the basis on which we review these things, how would we do it? And, you know, I just kind of put some general ideas here. One would be, you know, at the high end, was carve out MSMX and say, because of all the reasons we said before, it's very dense, it's well served by transit, it's near commercial areas, it's well served by retail and other support services. You could theoretically just carve it out, and the findings and the reasons given in the past for why you want to control hotel development might not apply within MSMX. So that would be one possibility. The other thing is to keep the special project, the special permit process, but restrict the number of rooms. I mean, I've actually seen 40 hotel room projects that say they're going to go through a special permit. There's one announced down, I think, in Soho. So it's 40 rooms, and they said they were going to go through this process to get an approval. You know, I don't know if they know what's involved. I don't know if they're just bottomless, you know, funding. But the one choice here might be to say, okay, if it's going to be greater than 300 rooms, I mean, we've seen this on the residential side where 300 units was the test for prevailing wage requirements under the tax abatement programs. But if you say if it's larger than 300 rooms, it has to go through Euler. If it's less, then either it doesn't have to do it at all, or maybe it goes through one of these lesser processes. So that's one option. The other option, which has been done for office space, is to look at sort of economic development kind of measurements. So you could look at hotel occupancy, and you could say, you know, if hotel occupancy gets up to 85%, that we don't need to do a special permit for that. Then the market is telling us that we're underbuilt. And so, you know, you can open up the sluiceways and build new hotels. But if it's below that, then we want a review of where these things are going. Or similar to what we do for cannabis licenses, you could say, what's the definition of too many hotels? It's, you know, they should be more than 500 feet apart, or there shouldn't be more than 3 of them on a block, or some other very specific test for geographic concentration. And so that's then, that becomes a very specific finding that could go through a faster certification process, because then it's a fact. It's like, you know, what's the geography here? How close is the closest hotel? What's the level of hotel occupancy? You know, those are the findings that could be used in a certification. And then as a general rule, and, you know, which we passed twice at the board, is that these findings should just be less vague. So even if you want to keep the current special permit everywhere in the city, including MSMX, then make the findings more specific to what the issue is, and you know, not so vague and not so hard to pull a proposal together and actually file for the special permit. Yeah.
David, can you think of conditions by which you'd be concerned about hotel development's impact on the affordable housing we hope to build?
I mean, I think it's what I said before, like if a site theoretically could have been built as housing and was measured in the 10,000, which we don't necessarily know. But yes, you would be losing housing and affordable housing in order to build a hotel.
And could you suggest ways that we can be proactive about that?
If you back up to the site, you know, you know, part of it is like, does anybody believe that everything that's red is gonna get built as housing? You know, not really. The 10,000 units was a measurement of what could happen in the next 10 years. It's not a measurement of what could happen forever and a day, you know, throughout all of MSMX. So, you know, would housing be built later on a different site? You know, probably. I think part of what I said was a lot of these sites are just too small to be built as housing anyway. And so, which by the way, could be one of the findings here. You could say it has to be a site of less than 5,000 square feet, you know, picking that as a number. And if that's one of the tests, then you're not really eliminating housing because you can't, you know, you can build a condo maybe on a site of that scale, but I don't know that you can build, you know, a real apartment building. You know, so that could be a test that would address, you know, your concern.
You're on.
I have two questions. So first, on this slide, just to be clear, all of these recommendations would require legislative action, correct? Okay. I just want to make sure we're all.
Yeah, I mean, and that, I didn't mention at the beginning, but part of how this came about was in August, after the MSMX was passed, we got questions back from city council about, well, all right, well, you mentioned, you know, the tax abatements and the hotel, what's your position on these things? So they were like, if you're gonna come out and say something, you know, say it now. Right. So that's why we're doing it.
And your second question.
My second question relates to this slide. I think the the fourth bullet here, which I think is key to this, which is about room rates.
Yeah.
The implication here, and I'm not saying it's wrong, the implication here is that supply might be constricting and therefore prices are going up. Are there other reasons that hotel room rates might be going up?
Well, that's why
that
I
are not
mentioned the
related to-
Airbnb thing. I think that
Right,
part of
okay.
it, that's a slice of demand that was being satisfied in another way.
Okay,
You know, COVID recovery is a big part of this.
Right.
You
okay,
know, yeah, it's everything. I mean, all of the macroeconomic stuff affects this, obviously, if tariffs or, you
Right.
know, God knows what. I think
asked another way.
visitation days are down, you know,
Right.
this year compared to last year because of that. So,
Asked another way,
yeah,
if, let's say, the sort of length or restrictions around the permit were loosened and it encouraged more supply, how confident are you that it would bring down rates?
I think it's the same argument as why building more housing
Right.
brings down, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Look, the flip side,
Right.
Yeah, room rates.
yeah, the flip side of this is, and this is something that Michael and I have talked about, you know, is right now, supply is being controlled by this process.
Correct.
It used to be supply was being controlled by whether investors wanted to build a
Right,
hotel
right.
or chains, or if you could get a construction loan, you know, so the market was deciding. And there was no question, you know, from 2010, you know, between COVID, there were a lot of hotel rooms built because they were as of right and
Right.
there was money available to do it. And I think part of what we're seeing is now with the passage of time and getting past COVID, we're starting to see the occupancies and the rates tick up again because even the large number of units that have been delivered are being, you know, absorbed.
Thank you.
I mean, we have someone online, but before we go there, Michael?
So, like you said, the hotel was on a cycle, business cycle with booms and busts. Office building construction on a cycle, residential, like with MSMX, was regulatory, we weren't allowed to build residential in MSMX before. And so if a building could be built as a hotel, couldn't that still be residential units, no matter how big or small? Because like, there's a hotel right here on Seventh Avenue by Penn Station that was called Athenia, was called Stewart, it was called Southgate, it had a bunch of names. But now that's gonna be affordable housing.
Right.
So any building that could be built as a hotel couldn't it also be used as housing?
I mean, I do think you get to a size where it's just not an efficient apartment building. The floor plates aren't efficient, you don't have enough units per floor. So I kind of threw out like 5,000 feet. Yeah, I mean, actually where I live, there was it was gonna be a 20-unit hotel, but it got half built and then stopped. And now it's being converted back to an apartment building. So I don't know, I feel like it can kind of go either way. I do think there are differences, what makes for an efficient hotel and what makes for an efficient apartment building are not the same size sites.
And questions, right? So that's the question.
Julie, how do we get David? Julie? We call him David?
No, I had my hand raised, but I was just trying to get to become a panelist, so I'm good for now. Thank you.
Okay, David?
Hank.
Hi. Sorry, am I recognized? Can I ask a question?
Yes, of
Oh,
course.
thank you. So first, David, compliments on a comprehensive presentation as always. This was very well done. And I'm highly supportive of some of these ideas to increase the supply of hotels. Just wanted to confirm as a question, you had a number of potential suggestions that we could consider on the last slide. They're not mutually exclusive, right? We could make some suggestions within the ULURP process and some outside of that. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, that's why I was saying like.
Yeah.
Greater than 300 units could be a full ULURP, but less than that could either be nothing or it could be, a certification, so yes, you could kind of marry these things together.
Perfect. Thank you.
I think
David?
I'm sorry, just to, and this was, something that we talked about. I didn't want to create something new. I think we mentioned it before, like what Julie said about, funding programs that don't exist. I think trying to create an approval process that doesn't exist would be too heavy a lift. So the idea is, pick the case and apply the appropriate tool.
Okay. David Shapiro?
You're cutting in and out. Can you talk a little more?
Hi, sorry, I don't have a question right now. I was just I raised my hand to be a panelist. Thank
Oh,
you.
okay.
Okay, any other questions? From the committee, okay, questions from the public? No questions public, so we'll go back into our committee session.
Maybe if you can put that
Business
last,
section?
slide.
Sure.
So now,
Yeah.
we need to be
Well,
talking
yeah.
about comments, working toward a resolution. That we can bring to, we need a draft resolution to bring to the full board. So, go.
Can you email that to the?
Sure.
Yeah, all at one time.
Mike,
What I wanted to say wasn't a question, it's just that, like,
we're into comments now.
okay. So the $350 average daily room rate is more in nominal dollars because of inflation going on. But if you calculate inflation, the room rate was much higher before 2015. And because we've had so many hotel rooms, we've since the special permit was in place for citywide in 2021, we still increased the number of hotel rooms by at least 10%. So I just don't see why we would try to expand hotels when we need to expand housing. So that's my main.
Yeah, I mean, can I,
Yes, please.
so, I mean, I think it's what I said before, like, why do we get to make that decision? That's why there's a market. So I guess that's one part of it. And I do think, that they're not mutually exclusive. I mean, I think, as I said, the 10,000 units is a very specific measure to how, the the secret gets done. So it's 10 years worth of development, and there are a lot more sites than that. In MSMX, it's not developing all the sites. And I think if we're careful about how we do this, it's not meant to be a runaway, and it's not meant to eliminate, good housing sites. So I think we can kind of address your concerns by trying to be careful about, what process is it and what are the findings that say we're not, robbing Peter to pay Paul. We're not, canceling an apartment building project to build a hotel.
The question is then, how do we balance the supply of both of them? Zool.
Just to follow up on Michael's question, would we want to steer hotel developers towards those sites that are inadequate for housing?
Yeah, it's not, again, I don't think it's our job to like be specific about which the sites are, plus, when we talk about MSMX, we don't really know how air rights and lot mergers and all these things are gonna happen. So, I think it would be more, trying to come up with a measurement of what's a site that's too small for an apartment building, but, still the right size for a hotel. That's one possible.
Yeah, some of your graphics show exactly that.
Right.
These particular slim buildings are appropriate for hotels, but not for housing.
But I mean, there are other tests, like I said, even if you wanted to do the geographic one, that there shouldn't be more than 2 hotels on a block. As opposed to 7 or 8 on 28th Street. I think you could.
They like the garden
Do that.
district.
I mean, the goal is not to somehow tip the scales. What the market's gonna do what the market does. I mean, if you look at like the downtown Brooklyn rezoning, that was supposed to be millions of square feet of office and no housing, and it ended up being no office and all housing. Because that's what zoning does. And so I don't think we want to get in the way of that, but I do think, we want to control the noise issues and the late night issues. And we do want to make sure that it's primarily, meant to be housing. But it's a use that should be accommodated. Yeah, sorry.
You're on?
So, given what you just said about wanting to maintain, or Nancy used the word balance with some sort of control of these options, trying to narrow in,
Yeah.
would you not agree, or maybe I don't want to put words in your mouth, that a full MSMX carve out? And would you
Yeah.
that would be the most permissive?
That is, yeah.
And we
that is
wouldn't
most-
be able to retain any of the things you're talking about, because then you could put a hotel
Right, no, right.
anywhere as
Then
a
it's
right.
back to where things were.
Okay,
Right.
so that may be, you're saying you might not recommend that action.
Might not recommend it.
I might not recommend that act. I'm just trying to do process of elimination here a little bit.
Yes.
Okay,
So then-
sorry, but Ankur has his hand on right now.
Yes or no, might not is silver gray, we're not anywhere, gotta get somewhere.
Yeah, okay, I think
Let's get somewhere.
I think
Okay.
I think we're getting there, so I'm just, but Ankur, I know has his hand up, but, okay. I will have other thoughts, but let me just
Okay.
process that.
Ankur?
Thanks. So I'm highly supportive of any resolution we pass that will help with the hotel supply issue. I think, that was a striking statistic, David, that you listed about how our vacancy rate is the lowest in the country. I know many people who've come to visit, and there's reporting on it, and anecdotally in my own life, report on how expensive hotel rooms have gotten, and appreciate that maybe on a post-inflation budget basis, you could compare it to previous years. I get that, but it's really expensive to the point where it sometimes prohibits people who want to come, and we should accommodate visitors. They're important for a lot of industries that are here in the city. I agree with the comment that Yaron and David made that the full MSMX carve out might be too permissive and may crowd out good residential sites. Maybe a compromise would be for the very larger projects over 300 rooms, where those are the bigger sites, where we might want to think about whether a housing project would be better. We could continue to have ULURP, but then below that, we can do a different process like the CPC certification, kind of picking out of this and in the spirit of Yaron's idea to kind of narrowed this down, but I think there should be a way we could reach a compromise that would allow for housing, and retain housing for some of those larger sites, but also make it easier, when the market allows for it, for hotels, and be strongly supportive of anything that gets us, a little looser on these hotels, because I think we need more rooms. Thanks.
You're on.
I guess I'm coming around to, certainly the last bullet point we should absolutely do, which is the board has asked before, which is like, let's get more specific on what we're asking people to judge when we're thinking about these sites instead of these very broad categories. And then I think looking at limits based on probably site size, that seems the most reasonable to me,
As opposed to like room.
as opposed to room count. But maybe I'm wrong. I mean, I'm just sort of throwing it out there that like, and the density question is a good one, but I just more like, if the site is over a certain size, it's more likely to yield housing and a lot of it. So having some sort of limitation there that it still goes through the full ULURP if it's over a certain size. But that we also home in on the more specific sort of requirements.
Any other comments on this resolution that we're getting close to writing? Michael?
I just want to be clear that New York City is never one of the lowest vacancy rate markets for hotels in the country. And it's always near the top. So no matter what year, how bad the economy is, it's always one of the most highest visited cities. But what you're saying is we're gonna say some, because of lot mergers and buying and selling lot, we're gonna set a limit of saying, hey, you're at this size, it's okay to take this lot off in the market for housing, and we can do it for hotel use. And I just don't, I'm okay with the clear findings, and that's fine, but to say that a certain size of lot is not good for housing when we need housing anywhere we can get it, I don't understand. And the market has not been, market forces have not built the housing that we need. So I don't see why we need to put a restriction, artificial restriction, when the market has not done as well with housing.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole host of reasons why, you know, the market works fine in Dallas to build housing, right? So why, you know, we don't have the same set of rules here. So the market doesn't function the same way in New York as it does there. I don't know that that's a zoning issue or a ULURP issue or anything else. It's part of it. It's why we went through the city charter. It's hard to connect those two things. And really, Michael, I mean, I'm just trying to find some measure that accomplishes what you're talking about. That says, yeah, we don't really want to take good residential sites off the market, but there are such things as not good residential sites. I mean, the smaller and smaller a residential project gets, the less likely it is in New York, which is very expensive to build. And it's hard to go through the approval process, separate from ULURP. It's just hard to build a small residential project. Happens out in the boroughs, doesn't happen in Manhattan so often. So I'm trying to find, you know, some measurement that says, you know, what you want to do. We don't want to take away real residential sites, but we do want to build some hotels. Sarah.
I'm gonna talk. David Shapiro.
Hi, folks. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Sorry, I'm in a car traveling for work. Sorry. So I've been on the development side of the hospitality business, and you know, what we're talking about in Midtown South are mostly C zoned properties, and those C zones allow for residential and for commercial use. And a lot of times, or almost all those times, it's going to go to residential use, where the hotels have actually popped up in the M zones. And so from an economic standpoint, I don't think that there's any risk here that it's going to take away from any residential housing. I think it's a moot point. I'd like to see, my business as somebody who's been able to develop hospitality has been basically crushed to zero over the past 5 years. And so I would like to see the market dictate what is possible, and create supply so that more folks can come visit and more folks can spend money in all the different places and all the different industries in New York City. Thank you.
Cool.
Well, I certainly agree that we need both more hotels and we need more affordable housing. However, I do think that the data is very clear to show that what the market is building is very, very expensive stuff. And so if we do want to push towards affordable housing, then perhaps we do want to put a finger on the scale a little bit and say that those properties that are more appropriate for hotels, are not appropriate for housing, be for hotels, and that those properties that are more appropriate for housing because they have the floor ratio should be for affordable housing.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I mean, can I just address what Zool just mentioned?
Yeah, sure, David, go ahead.
Sure. So yeah, I mean, that's between the C zoning and the M zoning in New York City. That's sort of where it's sort of played out. The C zoning has flexibility, and with where rents are today, it's driving folks to develop residential housing, and that's where folks are going to put capital and go and develop. I just, we want a healthy ecosystem here that provides, services and all different types of product to folks. And again, I really don't believe that allowing developers to go and develop hotels are going to significantly affect the residential output of this area. So I think there just needs to be an opportunity to do something here because the existing system doesn't work, and it's absolutely pulled every single possible capital source out of being able to build more of this product.
Dave, would you propose a resolution? Well, Kevin,
I just have a general comment that I'm
Okay.
in favor of this proposal, just in general, like letting market forces dictate the new investment to come into the area. Clearly, there's a need for it, given by price, but then also, I mean, Zool, you tell me, my impression is that the theater district still hasn't reached its pre-COVID peak, and part of that obviously is due to just the cost of coming and visiting it now. To the extent that we can alleviate that and make it easy for more tourists to come in, I think it's a positive thing for our district and the city overall, so I'm in favor.
so David, do you have a resolution you'd like to propose?
Well, I don't have like a quantitative answer to this question of like, what's a good hotel site versus what's a good residential site.
Well, then let's not include that, but let's put into the resolution.
As a
what we
general
allow.
concept. that,
Yeah.
But is the idea that, are we moving away from the whole special permit process and going to something else? Are we dividing the rooms up somehow?
I think my proposal is that we say under a certain, I don't, and we can't specify what that size is.
Yeah.
I understand, and I think that's okay. We are saying that would go through either a non-ULURP or a modified ULURP. An expedited ULURP or even not at all. We can decide that as the next question.
Right.
And then over that size is the same ULURP that it would go through now as a special permit. I think that's what we're saying.
Okay.
I don't think we're making a categorical claim about the special permit. I think we are limiting the scope of the special permit.
Right. I mean, effectively, what that's gonna do is you're not gonna, there's not gonna be like another Hilton Sixth Avenue built in MSM.
No, I know.
So, you're talking about smaller hotels that look more like, other than the street wall change, they're gonna be smaller hotels. You'll have a series of smaller hotels, and I said, maybe that's okay. But, that's picking a site size, says small hotels, big
Yeah.
apartment buildings, which might be fine, I just don't have a feel for if that's what people want to build, or. I would say there can't be a process. If you're gonna say these are small hotels, then you can't force somebody through a special permit or a certification or.
Yeah, I think that's what we're saying.
It's too expensive.
I think because we don't know how much of that 10,000 number,
Right,
if you let the market completely decide, I agree that too much of that 10,000 could disappear, but we don't know. So you have to draw the line somewhere.
yeah,
you know?
okay.
Okay, so do we have a draft resolution?
Does anybody else have
Make a motion. Anyone else?
on that?
Where do we stand on the proposal? I'm sorry.
We're trying to come up with a motion that we can vote on so that we can prepare a draft resolution to take to the full board.
How about something along, can I propose something?
It's up to David.
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
It's not a resolution.
Could we propose excluding the special permit from M zoned properties in MSMX? And then for C zone to have some sort of mechanism to make sure that the residential building of units is not compromised by that, right? The M zone properties are not allowed to have residential, or sorry, they're not allowed to have residential units. So therefore, there should be no question in that situation.
Yeah.
It all got rezoned.
Yeah, MSMX is a overlay, so the M
Right.
still exists and the C got overlaid on top of it, or
Okay.
R equivalent.
Got you. Okay, so that doesn't
So,
work
yeah,
then.
you can't
Okay.
really,
That doesn't work then. That's fine.
yeah.
So David, could you make a motion?
Sure. So our proposal, what did you have?
Well, besides the size that is unclear, are we going to do anything about the neighborhood factors? Whether it be how many on a block or how many rooms in a radius area?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess if we're gonna use site size as the test, then we're gonna just end up with a bunch of small hotels. So, is
Their
4 of
density
those
less, right?
okay on the same block? I don't know. I mean, we could layer that in but then that means that even the small applications have to go through the certification process, which is a pretty big deal. I mean, if you're building 50 or 100 room hotels and you have to go through certification to do that, it's a hurdle.
Historically, since, what was it, 1988, 71, we've had some sort of a special permit for hotels.
Yeah, well,
So we're not gonna remove it completely.
it's really only.
I don't believe that that's true.
2018, well, since.
2018.
since-
The older one was
2018.
M2 and M3 zones
Okay.
where they shouldn't have been building
The
hotels.
point I'm
anyway.
making is we're not gonna be able to remove it entirely because this is a citywide, not just for our community board. And there's gonna be a lot of resistance. So let's pick something that
Well,
we think is achievable.
Well, I think we're only saying within MSMX. I mean, that's
We're
kind of
only
what our
saying-
language has been.
Okay, so
in the
we're
past.
only saying within MSMX, okay,
I should clarify.
that's what.
Just to respond about that,
But-
so again, to restate where I think we are. Saying within MSMX, that based on lot size, site size, that under a certain unnamed
Yeah.
benchmark. Which we are not really qualified to determine, there would be an expedited or non-ULURP. Over, we would still do ULURP. We need to decide actually what that ULURP looks like. Is it expedited? Does it not exist? Whatever. Mike asked a question about density. Where I stand on density is that I am less concerned about density, and I wouldn't advocate to be part of this because I'm most concerned about the hotel and affordable housing trade-off. The density question is more about quality of life issues that you brought up. And you know, with the hotels will be smaller and it's the central business district of Manhattan, and I'm comfortable with whatever density emerges from that. And I think that is appropriate for our district.
So we have, did you make a motion?
The
But
last.
but,
Go
sorry.
ahead.
I was just
David.
gonna say, like, again, this is the central business district. I just think that it's important to, in this resolution, to identify the fact that the special permit process has been extraordinarily challenging to the supply of new hospitality in New York City. And you know, if we can't build hotels in the middle of Midtown Manhattan, then what are we doing here? Like, I'm just like, I would like, I would like to take a,
The whole thing is fine. Sorry, okay, we're now at 7:20. I want a motion. Can someone make a motion, please?
I move that we have a resolution that says that indicates how we believe that the hotel special permit overall needs to be modified to encourage production of hotel rooms. That the modification we're proposing would be that within MSMX, on sites that fall under a certain size benchmark and therefore would not be fully appropriate or totally appropriate or yield a lot of housing, that it have an expedited process to get the permit. Anything over that size would go through the current process.
So no process for that, but
We didn't really talk about it,
Certification.
but
Well, I would just like to say, I don't think we should have no process because that's how we got all those 8 hotels on 28th Street, which
Okay.
was problematic. So we need some process, but it would be much more limited. It wouldn't be a 2-year or a year.
but then
and a
you have to, if you want it to be a certification, which is the fastest way, then you'll have to come up with, findings that are specific. with that.
right.
Right.
Which I'm saying, I think we agree with. Do you think we need to determine those findings now?
I don't know how much of this is just getting a conversation started.
Exactly.
Yes, I think that's what.
So let me add to my motion. So we would also say that for the certification process, that the smaller site, that smaller sites would go through, we believe there should be less concrete, clear findings that determine yes or no in order to have it be far more expedited.
David, do you have anything to add to this? Shapiro?
yeah, I agree with the fact that there should be clear qualifications for what the permit, which should be allowed and not allowed, because right now it's a gray area and nothing gets built. So you know, if it meets the requirements, then you should be able to build. Otherwise, nothing's going to get built.
Okay, so we're trying to address. So right now, your Ron's motion is on the table. Do we have a second? To the motion. David
Yeah.
Sigmund seconded. So now let's take it to a vote.
Set,
Yes.
I'm a yes.
Can we hear the motion once again, please? David, since you seconded it, could you clarify
I think
what you
you're on.
seconded?
Okay.
And you guys
It's
work
2 tests.
together.
Right, so there's 2 tests, right, so the okay, the motion. We wanna address what we think are inefficiencies or issues with the hotel permit. Within MSMS. Lots of us under a certain size. And under a certain size because we think they would be less desirable for residential, because we don't want to cannibalize residential. Lots under a certain size that we are not specifying. Would go through an expedited CPC certification process to become hotels. The CPC would use a clear set, an unvague set of findings, like David just said, to determine, is it a hotel? Is it not a hotel? And it wouldn't be this vague determination that they use now.
What does expedited mean?
Expedited means
It's a certification.
a certification by the city
So
planning
the
commission.
certification process as it stands.
Yeah, we
No.
can't change the process.
So why say expedited? The process
Oh,
is.
because it changed from ULURP to
It was certification. Right now, it's a full ULURP. It would not be a full ULURP. It would be a certification by CPC, and essentially CPC is saying, does it meet the criteria, the very specific criteria to be a hotel, or does it not? And that could go very rapidly because it's a very specific set of criteria under a certain lot size. Over a certain lot size, it stays the same and it's a full ULURP.
Okay.
That is my motion.
Kevin,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Mike,
No.
Kristen,
Yes.
Libby,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Ron,
Yes.
Amy,
Yeah.
David,
Yes.
Okay,
Joel,
Yes.
Chris.
Yes.
Do we know? Oh, and Ankur's not here.
All right.
so we are finished with that. Motion to adjourn.
Oh, yeah.
Motion to adjourn,
Oh, but you still have your,
after. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Someone make a motion.
Second.
Motion to adjourn. Okay, second.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
I think my dinosaur city council note says that you can do it. That's chair.
Thanks for checking.
Okay.
I've been reading my
So-
motion book.
Are you have?
Oh, yeah. I've got like